And very pleased to be joined now by the commissioner of the Big Ten, Kevin Warren. I know it's an exciting day, a busy day for you. Give us a little background. How did this all come about?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're in college athletics, and especially with what's happened really since I've been here. I mean, you go back to 70 days on the job and dealing with the COVID-19 outbreak and all the different things we had to work through. Quite naturally, coming into this year, I had a sense that there would be some interesting times, even in 2021.
Right.
I didn't quite know what it would be. But then when we got the, ruling, from the Austin case and then NIL starting and just some of the other seismic shifts. And then quite naturally, Texas and Oklahoma announcing that they'd be joining the SEC. That was a time, and it's always, we're always in a state of reflection, but that was a time that we really had to take a step back and say, okay, what does all this mean? And so, George from the Pac-12 and then Jim from the ACC, we've developed a very close working relationship, and it started back even from a college football standpoint. We would have our CFP meetings. I mean, we're the three youngest commissioners.
Yes.
And so we had an opportunity to get together here in Chicago and sit down and really start, thinking through, what could we do as leaders in this business to help stabilize a very complex and turbulent time in college athletics, and what could we do to take the right first step? And so that meeting morphed into many other conversations, and then with our athletic directors and our chancellors and presidents, and we're here today.
You discussed shared values a lot today, and preserving the collegiate model. What parts of the collegiate model do you believe are in jeopardy?
I think clarity. I mean, look what's happened with the NCAA just recently. I mean, they pretty much have said, we need some help figuring this out. And that's why they created this Constitution Convention to try to figure out, what it means as we go forward. But when you take a step back right now and ask yourself, what does college athletics really stand for? What are the cornerstones? If you got 10 different people in a room and people who are in college athletics and said, what are our key cornerstones? You might get 10 different answers.
What should they be?
They should be that we need to put our student athletes at the center of all of our decision-making process, and we need to realize that they're not professionals, they're amateurs, they're student athletes, they're there to get a world-class education, and we need to do all that we can to empower them, to protect them from a physical standpoint, from a mental health and wellness standpoint, deal with all these social justice issues, to be able to really work through all these items that's on the table, gender equity, So I think we have an opportunity with our three conferences to really bring these 41 institutions together to keep a focus on creating an environment for our student athletes to get a world-class education, but also to build some consistency when it comes down to scheduling games. I mean, and then our student athletes, that's what they want. They love competing, especially across the country, and to afford them an opportunity to expand their opportunities to compete, get a great education, and support them in the right manner.
Okay, so from a scheduling point of view, what's kind of a realistic time frame as to when we might see some implications of the announcement that was made today?
Well, I think even this year, look what's going to happen on September 11th. I mean, we have Oregon playing at Ohio State.
Well, those games are already there.
Yeah, they're there.
Right.
But even though they're there now, at least this allows us to put some wrapping around. I mean, this year, I say that, because they're already on the book, but as we look to next year, to be able to study the schedule, what can we do from a structure standpoint? And then I think I had mentioned, earlier, but I think between 2022 and 2035, we already have 68 games, on the books between Big Ten and ACC and Pac-12 teams. If you add Notre Dame into the mix, it makes it 103. So a lot of the elements are there. But now it comes down to how do we structure those, how do we wrap those, and that's for football. And then we get into men's and women's basketball. We have some creativity with the ACC Big Ten Challenge. Right. How can we move that around? What can we do? Do we add to it? And then the Olympic sports. I mean, we have incredible Olympic sports athletes in all three of our conferences. But I think the biggest thing, Dave, is what it does. It allows us to hopefully kind of stabilize a very turbulent time in college athletics.
So when you guys use the term stabilization, is that in reference to conference alignment? Is it in reference to governance? Like, what are kind of the,
Everything.
what needs to be stabilized?
I think everything. I mean,
Okay.
conference realignment, conference movement,
Yeah.
governance, NCAA governance, all these different issues, college football playoff, the Austin case. I mean, we have all these. I mean, typically, if you had one of those issues to deal with in a year, it'd be busy.
Yes.
And we have about 10 of them.
College football playoff is something that everyone wants to talk about. I mean, crowning a national champion has been convoluted through the years, as you're well aware, in the history of college football. And now we've arrived at this system with the 14 playoff, and there was the talk of expanding it to 12 teams. Where does the Big Ten stand on college football playoff expansion, and how much of this is a reaction to what happened?
I can tell you where I personally stand. I believe in college football playoff expansion. Now, I don't know what the right number is, but I also believe in being very methodical, and that's why these last couple months I've taken time to really do my research, to talk to our student athletes, some past, some current, our coaches, our athletic directors, our chancellors and presidents, our faculty athletic representatives, our senior women administrators, to get a sense for what they think about it. Our bowl partners, our media partners. So I believe in it, but what I also believe in is that everyone, especially from a Power 5 standpoint, should have a seat at the table. And so when a lot of those decisions were made, we didn't have a seat at the table. And so we need to have a seat at the table. We need to be very thoughtful, and we need to make sure that those decisions are made for the right reasons at the right time. And then we need to make sure that we're very critically thinking as far as from the dissemination of those games. You know, is it right to have one media partner doing that? So, I mean, just to be very candid, we got to get these things on the table to do it the right way. And especially when you're evaluating, making these determinations 5 years early. But I just want to make sure, I don't have all the answers right now. I want to make sure that when I walk into that meeting on September 28th, I have a clear understanding from our Big Ten constituents of where we are and why are we there. And so that's why I've already interviewed over 100 people, taking just copious notes and make sure I have a good sense when we walk into the meeting.
You mentioned the television partner issue with the college football playoff, and as my understanding, the way the contracts are written right now, that would mean that this would have to be slowed down in order for other potential partners to get a chance to bid on that package. Is it the Big Ten's belief that this process should be slowed down?
And again, I mean, that's what I'm working through now. I'll know that by September 28th. But again, we have 5 years left on our agreement. And if this is the right time to extend the agreement, then it's the right time to do it. But I want to make sure that that decision is made in a non-emotional manner, that we don't just make the decision just to do it. And we have to look at it holistically. We have to know where the other conferences are. Yeah. You know, the SEC is expanding. You know, where's the Big 12? Just from a structure standpoint, before we start putting numbers on what's the right number to expand to.
What do you think the future of the NCAA is?
I mean, the NCAA has been around for a long time. They've had a very important role. But I think they've even raised their hand to say, we need some help in sorting this out. And that's what this Constitution Convention is about. I'll be very anxious to see what comes out of these meetings. You know, what does it really mean? But I know we have to do something, you know, because from an enforcement standpoint, a structure standpoint, governance standpoint, we have to get this right. And I think that's one of the things that this alliance does today.
Well, let me ask you this then. Will these leagues operate in a block for voting? I mean, let's say you're not aligned on an issue. It's certainly possible. I'm sure in the history of the ACC, the Pac-12, and the Big Ten, there have been issues where they haven't necessarily seen it exactly the same way because their constituents are different. Will you operate as a voting block? Is there an understanding you're operating together?
No, I mean, I think the biggest thing is for us, when we're competitors, you know, on the field, and just from a voting block standpoint, I just need to make sure that I serve our constituents. I mean, my responsibility is to make sure I do what's in the best interest of our chancellor and president, our athletic directors, and our student athletes in the Big Ten. So there has been no agreement, and there won't be an agreement that, you know, we'll move together and do certain things together. I think that the agreement is that we'll be methodical in our thought process. We'll be able to communicate with each other. We'll be collaborative, and we'll be honest with each other. And that's really, if we have that, then hopefully that will continually evolve. But we need all the conferences. We have to work to, and we want to work with the SEC. We want to work with the Big 12. and all the other conferences that exist. I mean, this is college, athletics, and we need everyone involved. There's a role for us to play, but we also need to make sure that we're organized and we're stabilized. And I can say candidly, being in this business, these last 6 months have been the opposite of being anything resembling what stability should be. And there's too much goodness in college athletics.
Well, let me ask you this in closing. There was a lot made today, as you are well aware, of the fact there is no formally signed agreement here, that this was an understanding between the three of you, looking one another in the eye and saying this is what we're going to do. And I think that the question that arises for a lot of people is, well, what if there's a leadership change? What if one of the three of you is no longer there? I mean, how does that impact it? Is this only an agreement between the three of you, or is it an agreement between the three conferences in principle, no matter who's leading?
That's a great question, and I think what it comes down to is that we had unanimous support with our chancellors and presidents and our athletic directors at 41 schools that span from Boston through Columbus, Ohio, all the way to Los Angeles, is that people were engaged. And I think, you just look at the number of individuals who have retired in the last year, the number of athletic directors, the number of coaches, commissioners. This business has been a grind, especially these last couple years. And so I think what we have is that we have elements in place that people said, we have to do something. And if not now, we didn't do this now, what were we going to wait for? And I think this was the appropriate time, while all of these different seismic shifts are going on, that we could come together and say, there's something that we owe to college athletics. It's been good to all of us. Many of us have been college athletes ourselves, and we've been blessed at the Big Ten. We have an incredible network partner in Fox, and Big Ten Network, here, the work that you all do on a daily basis. And ESPN is a great media partner for us in football and CBS in basketball. So we're blessed. We're in a really good position. But I think the beauty about life is when you have an opportunity that you can take a leadership role and help the industry at large. I think that's what true leadership is. Well, I know you've been working a ton on this. I would say take a break, but I know there's no rest for the weary. We kick off this weekend. Yes, absolutely. A lot to get excited about with football coming up this week. Thanks so much for taking the time, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens here in the years to come with this alliance. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Thank you.